We're not interested in rebuilding the world as it was in 2019. We are building Scotland for future generations, and we must do so with ambition and with resolve. I know that if we can capture the same energy, imagination and urgency that we've seen in the last couple of years, we will deliver a springboard to a fairer, greener Scotland for future generations.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support the Beyond Borders Women in Conflict 1325 programme.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government is providing funding of £300,000 for the 1325 Women in Conflict Fellowship Programme in 2021-2022. The programme was inspired by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which emphasises the important role of women in the prevention and resolution of conflicts, peace negotiations, peace building, peacekeeping, humanitarian response and in post-conflict reconstruction. The programme is delivered by Beyond Borders, a Scottish third sector human rights law organisation with a strong track record of working with the United Nations on international conflict resolution and related issues.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Would he agree with me that if Scotland is to fulfil its aim to be a good global citizen, it must approach international challenges in a holistic and connected way, and that by supporting this programme, the Scottish Government acknowledges how vital gender equality is to both conflict resolution and climate justice?
Cabinet Secretary.
I agree entirely with my colleague the Member for Glasgow, Kelvin. I completely agree. This is why we are committed through the Scottish Government's programme for government of this year to increase our International Development Fund from £10 million to £15 million, as well as including the new climate change element in the 1325 Fellowship Programme. The increase in international development funding will finance a new £500,000 Women and Girls Empowerment Fund for partner countries to take forward work to ensure that women and girls are safe, equal and respected, and that will be launched next year.
And supplementary, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In 2019, I led a debate on Resolution 1325, Women, Peace and Security, where I highlighted the invaluable role of women as conflict negotiators, largely as women focus on housing, food and water security instead of solely military security. So can the Cabinet Secretary further detail any additional plans specifically related to this Scottish Parliament and the Government that can support and enable women to become conflict negotiators, particularly in the Middle East?
Cabinet Secretary.
In terms of taking a holistic approach to international challenges, we are committed to policy coherence for sustainable development. Therefore, in the programme for government, we set out that we would reconstitute a ministerial working group on PCSD to lead on our ambition to align domestic policy objectives and activity with our international development objectives when engaging with the Global South. For sustainable development, therefore, sustainable development, therefore, a sustainable development
is to fulfil its aim to be a good global citizen, it must approach international challenges in a holistic and connected way, and that by supporting this programme, the Scottish Government acknowledges how vital gender equality is to both conflict resolution and climate justice.
She is joined this morning by George McPherson, Head of Policy and Alignment, Scottish Government, and Lorraine Walkinshaw, Scottish Government Legal Directorate at the Scottish Government. Can I welcome you all to the meeting this morning, and Cabinet Secretary can invite you to make an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Convener. Today we are focusing on the European Union and in particular alignment with European Union laws and standards. The background to this, of course, that the people of Scotland have made clear on a number of occasions, not least in the Brexit referendum, that Scotland should continue to be a part of the European Union, and the Scottish Government believes that the people of Scotland should have the right to choose their future as an independent nation, which is a member state of the European Union in its own right, and will continue to advocate for Scotland's place in Europe and the world.
And as we emerge from the public health crisis, there are further tests ahead that will shape the world around us and for future generations. The Scottish Government is determined to play our part and to make our contribution. That starts with an internationalist outlook based on cooperation and not confrontation. In the last 5 years, we've set out a clear direction of travel. For example, in January of this year, we published Scotland's Vision for Trade, inspired by and rooted in our national performance framework. It describes the 5 core principles underpinning the trading relationships we want Scotland to have now and in the future. These are inclusive growth, well-being, sustainability, net zero and good governance. Over the coming months, we will engage with and seek to learn from those who have an interest in helping shape a feminist approach to foreign policy. Alongside those responsibilities as a good global citizen, our international work is vital in promoting Scotland's cultural and economic interests. Of course, membership of the EU is about much more than trade deals, and Scotland shares with the EU a vision for Europe that embodies democratic values, promoting the well-being of all in society, rises fully to the challenge of the global climate emergency, and supports a sustainable economic recovery from the global pandemic, from the global pandemic. We believe the pandemic and the response to it has demonstrated the need for more cooperation between independent nations, not less. And the election in May once again underlined the strong support from the people of Scotland for our view that rejoining the European Union at the earliest opportunity as an independent country represents the best future for Scotland.
Resolution, which is resolution number 7. That resolution is entitled Child Rights and will be proposed by Ruby Zajac of Southside Central Branch, who is a first-time speaker at conference, seconded by Alison Doulis MP. So welcome to Ruby and Alison.
All people are born free and equal, so says the Declaration of Human Rights. Would that it were so. Because from before we are born, the fulfilment of those rights is defined by our postcodes, by our parents' employment, by the homes we live in and the schools we attend. But children in Scotland are calling time on this inequality, this unfairness. And finally, the grown-ups are listening. The UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Bill seeks to put children's human rights at the heart of our political system and the policies, laws, taxation and funding decisions that stem from it. It commits to proactive steps to educate more children and adults across Scotland about how to realise these rights, support them and create avenues for children to seek redress if they are overlooked or abused. We know they are abused. We know that the actions of the DWP directly harm children's rights to food, to clothes, to an adequate standard of living. We know that the actions of the Home Office directly harm children's rights to family, to identity, to international protection. Everyone jumps to ratify human rights treaties, yet our SNP Scottish Government would have made us the first developed nation to put these rights into law. So when the Supreme Court found parts of the Children's Rights Bill to be out with the competence of our Scottish Parliament, who were they protecting? The bill aims to put an onus on all public authorities to respect children's rights. That could have included UK authorities, said the Supreme Court. Well, conference, don't you agree that UK authorities should be held accountable for the 31% of children living in poverty, the 46% of black and ethnic minority children living in poverty, the 49% of children in one-parent households living in poverty? Children denied their rights to adequate housing, to food, to culture because their families can't afford it. Of course, human rights are political when they're actually applied universally. We need independence to fully protect children's human rights. 2, the British state does not stand up for human rights. And 3, the action required to make children's rights real is radical. To protect and defend the human rights of every child in Scotland means redistributing wealth through fiscal reform, means direct routes to citizenship for refugees and migrants, means integrating fee-paying schools into a fully comprehensive education system, means rent controls and planning reform, means real play-based engagement with children about what they think. Yes, from MSPs to NHS bosses, police constables and head teachers, every adult in Scotland needs to take play seriously to make children's rights real. For play is the language of children. In my play work with 3 to 12-year-olds, I've learned to underestimate them at my peril, that children as young as 3 are articulate about the core values of human rights and fairness, that children really can tell us what they need if we are prepared to listen to them. I've used story play to explore really serious issues with early years children, like the impact of lockdown, mental health, the need for play and education and family and love. So I'm going to end with the words of one of the children I work with, who said at a Have Your Say Through Play consultation about the bill. This is the different rights. This one is the right for freedom, and that one is the right to be loved. That one is the right for respect. That one is the right for privacy, and that one is the right for education, the right to be heard, and the right for a home. And then you have the cake. There's a strawberry layer and a chocolate layer, and then there's peach icing with sprinkles, and then you have some little edible pearls, and then you have love. You have love hearts all around because you have to have a lot of love for it to actually work. You have to have a lot of love and a lot of teamwork. Conference, please support the motion.
What the fuck are you talking about?
We must remain resolute in our commitment to deliver a revolution in children's rights in education in Scotland. The motion calls on the Scottish Government to continue working at pace to ensure that they address the areas found to be out with competence, deliver the UNCRC policy and avoid further challenge. Now, I don't have time to share all 54 articles in the Convention, but I will remind us of a few that strike an additional chord for me. Article 22, a refugee child must get appropriate protection and assistance to help them enjoy all their rights and get the help to be reunited with their parents if they get separated. Article 23, a child with disability has the right to live a full, decent and dignified life. And Article 31, a child's right to relax and play. As an independent nation, we all have children's rights in our hearts and in our laws. Support the motion.
Children and young people in my constituency and the length and breadth of Scotland have for many years been learning about their rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I have heard fascinating debates with young people on which is their favourite, the one they think is the most important to them. To be able to relax and play, the right to education, the right to be safe from violence.
I was so proud when, after 10 years of campaigning by young people and civil society, that our Parliament legislated unanimously to incorporate the UNCRC into law, leading the world in securing for our young people now and in the future a guarantee that their rights will be respected. Conference only the most cynical could oppose such legislation, and here enters the UK Tory government to challenge this decision in the courts. Friends, we know that this is a government which denies young people who with their families have come to make their home in Scotland the same rights to financial support as their classmates, through the unfair policy of no recourse to public funds. A UK Home Office which further impoverishes family with the exorbitant cost of obtaining the citizenship to which they are fully entitled. And that's all before we consider the indescribable cruelty of a Prime Minister and Home Secretary who would sooner see children lose their lives in the English Channel than offer them sanctuary.
Where do we draw the line? I say now. And this motion and Sally's fantastic speech highlights exactly why we need action and education. As the author and activist Laura Bates highlighted in her book Misogynation, when we learn that women are dramatically underrepresented in our parliaments and businesses, and then see our Prime Minister and Scottish First Minister on the front pages under the headline, "Never mind Brexit, who won Lexit," these things are related. When a newspaper runs an article describing rape as a romp, or a jury acquits an accused rapist because of the previous sexual history of the accuser, these are not isolated incidents. And when a black woman is asked where the toilets are by a male attendee of the conference she is due to speak at, when a woman is in a wheelchair, is physically pushed aside by a man in the street, or when a trans woman is bullied in the workplace, or an older woman is completely ignored by a shop assistant, these are interconnected, not separate issues. Until we join the dots, we haven't any hope at all of stopping misogyny. And Laura Bates is right, because across the world, 137 women a day are killed by their male partner. Not all men are the problem, but all men have a role and an opportunity to be part of the solution. It's crucial to involve men in the conversation and in the action because it affects them too. Toxic masculinity creates a hostile environment for men and boys, as well as women and girls. And it's no coincidence that the rate of male suicide and murder of men on our streets is so high. The sooner we take action, the sooner we will live in a society that respects and cherishes all of our citizens and their rights to live freely and without fear of running at night or just walking home.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you, Conference. I want to start off by unambiguously speaking in favour of this motion and its intentions. As I was looking at the motions for Conference, I was excited to see many motions addressing women's safety in the wake of Sarah Everard's murder. It is so important to continue to tackle the misogyny at the root of so much violence in our lives and our communities. As a bisexual woman, I can speak personally to the way that street harassment can so quickly turn to sexual and physical violence. However, as I was reading the motion, I could not help but notice a glaring and serious absence within it. Although this motion seems to tackle misogynistic harassment, it does not do so in an explicitly intersectional way. Now, I understand for many people this sounds abstract and academic, an ideal rather than a necessity. Why can't we just say women and leave it at that? To answer that, let me put you in the context of my life. I am a disabled, working-class bisexual woman. I walk through some of the most dangerous and high-risk streets in Edinburgh and Glasgow as a student nurse and a care assistant. As a queer woman, I am stereotyped as sexually available, and as a bisexual specifically, I am stereotyped as a liar. I am not only unable to avoid many of the riskiest situations for street harassment, but those experiences are more likely to turn to violence and less likely to be taken seriously than those of other women. At the same time, when I report, I am not seen as a woman in need of protection and consideration. At best, my concerns are not heeded. At worst, other women perceive me as a sexual threat, and their concern over sexual harassment can very quickly turn to throwing me out of bathrooms and changing rooms, which in turn makes me more vulnerable. When it comes to these types of motions and sentiments, I have learned the hard way that when they say women, they often do not mean queer, disabled, working-class women like me. They also don't mean young, vulnerable trans women like my little sister, who only has to open a newspaper to see how thoroughly she is rejected from the conversation that is supposed to protect her. They don't mean queer women of colour like my fiancée Sarah, who experiences both racist and misogynistic harassment, and these two things cannot be separated for her. They, to focus only on one, rejects her. This isn't to count many other women, Muslim women, black women, migrant women, women with no recourse to public funds, whose experiences of misogyny are also considered niche and unrelated to the wider problems facing all women. I know this may feel harsh, but I live with the consequences of my experiences of misogyny being seen as niche every day. I understand the urge to act fast and to be decisive, but in taking this motion forward, we must insist that the Misogyny and Criminal Justice Working Group look at street harassment in an explicitly intersectional way. We are already living in a world of implied intersectionality. Now we have to move into a world where that intersectionality is actually a reality.
Raising this is because when I am seeing motions, laws, or bills like this, it implies intersectionality, and it doesn't deliver. The issue is reflected in many guidance documents and reports, which has kept on saying the visibility and inclusion of marginalised women when you are trying to is important, especially when you are trying to tackle misogyny. The National Centre of Social Research, released on the 9th of November, has stated this. The report developed by the LGBTQ+ anti-abuse group charity Gallup has stated this, and many more. Despite my criticism, this motion is important and essential. But when the Misogyny and Criminal Justice Working Group is developed, it needs to reflect the experiences of all women, not just those from, I don't like saying this, but from privileged backgrounds. It needs to include women of colour, women who have no recourse to public funds, trans women, bisexual women, and many, many more. Because misogyny is not just one form, it's in many forms. You see it with Sally's experience, you see it with my fiance's experience, Emily Radcliffe, and it's also with my experience when I was told to go back to the kitchen and make more fried rices.
As always, it's a pleasure to address you as our party's Westminster leader, and given that we're gathering in late November, let me take the chance to wish each and every one of you a very happy St Andrew's Day when it comes on Tuesday. But just as I think of St Andrew, who history tells us made his way right across Europe on small boats, my thoughts naturally turn to the truly heartbreaking events in the Channel. Because Andrew may well be sainted today, but in his own time, I have little doubt that he too may have been dehumanised and branded a travelling migrant. If the horror of these deaths is to stop, we must see those desperate people for who they truly are. They are human beings exploited by smugglers and too often abandoned by the powers that be. Conference, human beings need humane solutions. They need our help. All of us, whether nationally or locally, must urgently work together and provide safe and legal humanitarian routes so that these horrors, just off our coasts, safe and legal humanitarian routes so that these must urgently work together and provide safe and legal humanitarian routes so our coasts finally end once and for all. That is why Scotland must have the chance to escape that crippling corruption. Because with independence, we know we can do so much better than this. Friends, all of these recent scandals might hurt the Prime Minister in the polls, but putting politics aside for a second, I genuinely worry that ultimately it also distracts from the very real issues that are beginning to bite. In the real world, away from the political circus at Westminster, people are suffering a Tory cost of living crisis. Inflation is running at 5% and the threat of mortgage interest rate hikes is a real worry on the horizon. Rising day-to-day costs and rising household bills are the main focus for most families. Friends, independence is now the pathway to safety and stability. It offers an escape from the constant crisis of Westminster control. Built on the solid foundations of our own democratic decision, independence offers the opportunity to build the post-pandemic future we all wish to see. The chance to build a new Scotland that finally takes its natural place amongst the nations of the world. We got a brief glimpse of that when the representatives of those nations visited Glasgow earlier this month. Because we all know it was our First Minister who led the way at COP26. From passionately promoting a just transition to championing climate justice, she worked tirelessly for a green future here at home, but also globally. Mature, measured, and thoughtful leadership. The leadership we need now, and exactly the kind of leadership that will win our future. Just imagine what our First Minister will do when she's democratically elected as a leader of an independent Scotland. Conference, that is the future now in front of us. That is the opportunity now in front of us. A nation in waiting, and a future that is fair, a future that is green and European.
Once again, we're using the hop-in platform, and I hope you will hop in for the full conference, all the way right through to the First Minister's keynote address on Monday. We have great speeches from Deputy First Minister John Swinney and our Westminster leader Ian Blackford, who faces Boris Johnson down every week at Westminster. And conference comes to a close with the much anticipated address from our party leader Nicola Sturgeon. As well as speeches, our agenda is packed full of resolutions for debate, and I'll be looking forward to much lively discussion across these next 4 days. Regular attendees of virtual conference will be happy to know that by popular demand, the much-loved Blether function returns, where you can virtually catch up with friends that you can't see in real life. Friends, the SNP gathers this weekend in great shape, but also with great resolve. The last couple of years have been challenging for all of us, and they've made us all think about what really matters in our lives. As a responsible government, the SNP's first priority has been, and remains, steering Scotland safely through the pandemic. While the whole Westminster system is quite clearly broken beyond repair, we are focused on delivering for the people in every part of Scotland. And as we look to the future, we'll urge the people of Scotland to think about what kind of country they want to live in when the pandemic is over. Who's best placed to make decisions affecting their lives? who is most committed to making Scotland a fairer, more prosperous nation and tackling key issues like the climate emergency. And we will not allow Scotland's future to be limited by the relentless negativity, the can't-do attitude and the complete lack of vision from the unionist parties. And we will not allow Scotland's future to be limited by the relentless negativity, the can't-do attitude and the complete lack of vision from the unionist parties. Our case for Scotland's future is one based on optimism and ambition. A belief that our nation has what it takes to be a successful, independent nation. And a belief that the people who live here can take better decisions about their lives rather than leaving it to Westminster. That's a case we will make in the months ahead, and that's a case which will lead us to independence. Friends, earlier this year we witnessed a Scottish Parliament election of genuinely historic significance, and you all played a crucial role. While I can't ask the conference hall to show its appreciation for your hard work and commitment, let's at least give ourselves a big virtual round of applause. And the result of your endeavours delivered a result which was quite simply stunning. No party has ever received more votes. No party has ever received a larger share of the vote for a Holyrood election. And despite the combined efforts of the pro-union forces ranged against us, you returned 64 MSPs to Parliament, despite the system being set up specifically to prevent such a result. Only by becoming an independent country can Scotland rid itself of Westminster control. Conference earlier this month, the world's eyes were on Scotland as Glasgow hosted COP26, and the world was not slow in telling us they loved what they saw. Through the exemplary leadership of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, we were given a tantalising preview of how the world will welcome Scotland to the top table of nations of this world. But to do that, and to do it properly, we need so much more than the constraints of the Union can offer. We need our independence. And of course, I don't need to convince you of that. But working together, we must continue to win over our fellow Scots who are not yet convinced, and we can convince them with the power of our positive vision. We can convince them that in an independent Scotland, everyone's basic needs are met as a right and are no more at the mercy of the Westminster elite. An elite who, of course, have trashed the UK's global reputation. An elite which has presided over increasing inequality and an utterly unbalanced economy that prioritises London and the southeast of England over all other parts of the UK. Delegates, we can do so much better than this. Scotland deserves better than this. Never before in our history have so many people in Scotland joined our common cause, who now share our belief that independence is the correct future for our country.
European nation and the SNP have stood up for Scotland in Europe for over 40 years. We have sent no less than 8 SNP MEPs to the European Parliament, beginning with the mighty Winnie Ewing, who is still fondly referred to as Madame Écosse. Winnie was first elected to the European Parliament in 1975 and served for 24 years. She was chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Culture and Education, and she played a key part in the establishment of the Erasmus programme, which we now so sorely miss. The Alliance now represent 49 political parties across 19 states. EFA is committed to ensuring that all European stateless nations and regions have a voice in the European Parliament, and they have stood by us over the decades. And last time I checked, that's sadly what we still are, a temporarily stateless European nation, a sub-national actor. But please be assured, no one is fooled. Everyone is waiting for us to be a nation again. When I arrived in the European Parliament, I was humbled to be greeted so warmly and held so close. In Europe, unlike the UK, Scotland is held in very high regard. They see us as leaders and innovators, as good global citizens, as friends. Everyone knows who our First Minister is. Everyone knows our circumstances. Everyone wishes us well. They stand with us in solidarity. And as they say in Catalonia, solidarity is the tenderness of the people. And nothing could have shown just how ridiculous our subnational status is more than COP26. The world came to Glasgow. 197 heads of states and delegations came to Glasgow, and our First Minister wasn't invited to the convention of the parties. However, you can't keep a good woman down. We all saw the photos with everyone who mattered. Iron brew and bowls were exchanged. World leader after world leader sought out our First Minister. They know our situation, they can understand our predicament, and we can see before our eyes the regard Scotland is held in and the strength of our international presence. And nothing could have made the case for independence clearer than the way we were treated at COP. A country internationally recognised as a world leader in mitigating climate change was denied a place at the climate change table. A country who invented the concept of a just transition was shut out from the just transition negotiations. A country where the decision about whether or not a licence is granted for an oil rig in our waters is being made by another country. Please let me be clear on this point. It's Scotland's oil, and it's staying in Scotland's ground. We welcome the world to Glasgow as a nation in waiting. We know we have a democratic case for self-determination, and so does the world. Europe is our home. They have kept the lights on for us. Terry Renka, Green MEP and chair of our Friends of Scotland group, sent this message this morning. Terry says, now more than ever, we need to strengthen the ties between Scotland and Europe. We share common values and a vision for a greener, fairer and more equal society.
especially in times when our democracies are under attack by authoritarian forces. We have to stand together to defend these values.
It was an opportunity to remind our friends that our referendum will be held before the end of 2023. 2022 is before the end of 2023. I said to them, be ready next year, just in case. Last year, we produced a leaflet to celebrate the SNP in Europe. COVID stopped and our distribution, but if Branches wants any of this leaflet, please let me know. The SNP has stood in Europe for 40 years. Scotland is at the heart of Europe. From extending voting right to 16 years old and to all who live here, to our vision of a well-being economy, redefining what it means to be a successful nation in the 21st century. Now is the time for Scotland to prepare to return to Europe and to take our rightful place as a full member of the European Union.
Not yet be a member of the United Nations in our own right, but our First Minister has demonstrated that when that day comes, Scotland can and will have a powerful and positive role to play on the world stage. Tackling the climate emergency is not going to be easy, but we have no choice. We need to act now for the sake of our children and our grandchildren.
Like all nations, day-to-day life will continue to change in the coming years because of climate change. This year's COP26 in Glasgow has made it clear that our domestic climate targets in progress towards meeting them continues to be world-leading, receiving attention from other countries, states and institutions. But we are still, unfortunately, constrained by a UK Tory government who have made it clear that the quality of life for the people who live here is of little concern to them. In this, the just transition to net zero represents another area where we can make the case for independence through progressive policy. Support for independence is so high among younger people in part because the SNP-led Scottish Government has made it clear that they will have a brighter future in an independent Scotland. This resolution sends a message that the SNP puts the welfare of people living in Scotland at the forefront of every issue, that the just transition will not be another opportunity for eco-capitalists to squeeze more profits in the name of climate justice. Conference, as a proud member of the Aberdeen Independence Movement, I have heard from people who have worked in the oil and gas sector their whole lives. Although most of them cannot ignore the reality of climate change, they are concerned that they will be left behind and that they have no future. By listening to their concerns, we can identify areas where the just transition could improve, such as abbreviated cross-training opportunities for greener jobs that are related to their original fields. Similarly, by listening to the many women, minority ethnic, and disabled people who are already at a social and economic disadvantage, we can build a green energy sector with equity and social justice for everyone. Making the just transition work in its practical application represents another vital leadership role for Scotland internationally. It also sets up the type of independent country that we intend to be. This is the time to make big structural changes that work for everyone in Scotland, and this resolution sets out a process through which the just transition will do just that.
We're the ideal size to succeed. 7 of the 10 richest developed countries in the world have populations similar to or smaller than Scotland's. None of them have any natural advantages, except one. They are independent, with control of their own economic policy. And Scotland has a big economy. Our national income in 2019 was £177 billion. That means we're richer per head than many wealthy countries, such as Italy, Japan, and New Zealand. Being an independent country within the EU would mean